For those old and new, my name is Marlo Brooks. I am a student at CSUSB, a senior actually, studying English in the College of Arts and Letters. Just want to give a quick introduction of myself. I've been, we've been doing this show for a few months now, and every week just seems to broaden and broaden my perspective on the world and how I can better change and better affect and better place myself and what we can do to better our situations. And once this pandemic overcomes and these racial issues overcome, what the steps we'll be proceeding in next to do so. And that's what these conversations are for. What's next? What happens after this? As you guys continue to come through every week, we provide questions and comments to whatever's going on, whatever the topic is. If you have a question that's maybe something going on in your community itself or in your family itself that you may want to bring to us and our panelists to possibly get a solution or answer on, that's what we have these open discussions for. So without further ado, we're going to get started with the show. And you know, you guys, we always start our show off with CSUSB's land acknowledgement, paying homage and honor to the land on which our university sits on. So we recognize that California State University of San Bernardino sits on the territory and ancestral land of the San Manuel Band of Mission Indians. We recognize that every member of the CSUSB community has benefited and continues to benefit from the use and occupation of this land since the institution's founding in 1965. Consistent with our values of community and diversity, we have a responsibility to acknowledge and make visible the university's relationship to Native peoples. By offering this land acknowledgement, we affirm Indigenous sovereignty and will work hard to hold CSUSB more accountable to the needs of American Indian and Indigenous people. So we honor and we thank you. So today, guys, we're gonna be watching a film, and our film. Sorry, getting all my screens together. Today's film will be on police brutality against people with disabilities. A very important listen for today's topic. So, welcome, Leroy. Um, we'll be watching the film. Once our film is over, I'll be introducing our panelists for today. Keep in mind, guys, as the film proceeds, if there's anything that captures you during the film, and you may want to have a question on it or more dialogue on it itself, feel free to hit that Q&A button at the bottom of your screens to post any questions or comments you may have, and we will get to them in the question part of in the Q&A portion of the show tonight. So, again, we thank you for joining. And welcome back to Conversations on Race and Policing. And we'll be watching a film shortly on police brutality against people with disabilities. So thank you. We'll be starting the show. All right, guys, welcome back. Welcome back. So a very powerful piece and much needed in what's going on in today's world. I wanted to honor today's film by speaking up on recent topics that happened in the news this week. And then I also want to introduce my co-host, Stan Futch, who has joined us. So I'll be introducing him shortly. So just to go into some recent news, over in Rochester, New York, the chief and the deputy police chief have been let go from their positions in the RPD, the Rochester Police Department, less than a week after the body cam footage was released of a fatal incident that left Daniel Prude, an unarmed 41-year-old Black man who was having a mental health episode while visiting his brother in Rochester. Officers have held him down in the street and placed a spit hood over his face. Daniel Prude suffocated while in police custody. This incident happened on March 23rd, 2020. And since then, the police department had released conflicting reports of what actually happened during the altercation. They initially called it a drug overdose. 7 other officers have since been suspended. The family of Prude are now suing the chief, the city, and others, arguing that the officers who arrested their loved one used physical deadly force where Prude was not a threat. Also, in recent news, A 13-year-old boy with autism was shot several times by police officers who responded to his home in Salt Lake City, Utah, after his mother called for help. The 13-year-old, named Lyndon Cameron, is now recovering in a Utah hospital from sustained injuries from the Salt Lake City Police Department. His mother stated that they were supposed to come out and be able to de-escalate the situation using the most minimal force possible. Instead, two officers went through the front door of her home, and in less than 5 minutes, they were yelling, "Get down on the ground," before firing several shots. Mayor Aaron Mendenhall has vowed that the investigation will be handled swiftly and with transparency for the sake of everyone. Our prayers go out to little Lyndon Cameron, for a speedy recovery. So, when speaking of officers responding to cases of mental health, this is a prime example why funding for police departments across the nation um, should be allocated to other resources to help and to respond to calls of incidents in these natures when it comes to our disabled and our mental health citizens around the world. So now I want to introduce my co-host, Stan Futch, an activist and community leader here in San Bernardino, also a part of the West Side Action Group here in San Bernardino. So Stan.
How are we doing tonight? Glad to be here. Sorry I have to leave real quick, but I wanted to make some statements before I did go. And one of the things I've noticed is from the powerful movie was how many people get hurt after the fact. You know, the young lady living in a house that she was born in and grew up in and can no longer stay in that house because of what took place, and it was her that called 911. Can you imagine the power, the amount of guilt that she must feel having dialed those numbers? The other young man taking his life into his own hands and sparing the lives of others by telling everyone in the theater to leave so they wouldn't get hurt because he knew he was going to get hurt and there would be some problems. So it's a powerful thing, that just the fact that not only are the victims, but everyone around the victims, family, friends, and anyone that knows them, the pain that they all go through. It's a powerful thing. On a local level, San Bernardino County has taken a real big step towards mental health. And not only mental health, but racism. And so I'm still concerned about what's going to happen in San Bernardino County, because the sheriffs, they take the mental health training and the racism training, and they're real progressive on sending their officers to school. However, the city of San Bernardino does not. And then I saw so many political things going on in the movie, and yet out of all those conversations, and I'll have to go, so I'd like to hear about it. Jeremy said he'd let me know after the fact, but I'd like to hear what the panel has to say about that, because so many conversations are being held, so many conversations about racism, so many conversations about mental health, but laws need to be made to make it right. In other words, you can't just talk about it and think it's going to be okay. That's not going to happen. Laws need to be made so that people can survive, or people can be held accountable for their actions. My question is, what can be done to make Black lives and mental health a priority? Many responses to incidents of mental health, when you dial 911, you're getting a law enforcement officer, and his job is one thing: to enforce the law. And so when you dial 911, you're going to get a law enforcement officer who's going to come there with one purpose: to enforce the law. He doesn't care if you're mentally ill. He doesn't care if you're in a wheelchair, as we saw. It's a sad state of affairs. And so, but at the same time, it's really hard for families who have someone they can't control not to pick up that phone and call 911. And you're calling for help. And instead of getting help, you're getting murder. So I will thank the panel, and I apologize to them for not being able to stay around. I have another meeting, and so please, I will look at the video, and I will follow up, and I'll stay on for another 5 minutes so I can hear what people have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Stan. We'll be going into, I'll be introducing our panelists next, and then we'll go over into the Q&A portion of the show. So if you haven't already, hit that Q&A button if you have any questions following our panelists discussion. So first up, I want to introduce Emmitt H, an award-winning Bronx filmmaker, director, and producer, and is the founder of the nonprofit, not-for-profit company, Wabi Sabi Productions. Welcome, Emmitt. I did want to ask, what did you think? What were your thoughts on the film today? Do we have Emmitt muted right now? If not, we'll.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir. There we go.
Okay. Yes, it's been a while. Hold on, I'm getting the feedback. Okay, can you hear me now? Okay. Yes, it was kind of interesting to get a fresh look at the film after all these years, and I realized that one thing I didn't know I really captured it as well as I believe I did now was the collateral damage caused by not just the victims, but there's victims and then there's victims who are victims because of the incident other than the one who is deceased. And it was crucial to hear their stories and let them tell it the way it was and how it impacted their life totally. And so I really enjoyed, hearing that, because I think this film, which was created in a way that you could use this as a tool to have forums like this one with community people, including police officers and those other legislators and community people, to have discussions around this issue. And I thought nothing can be more impactful than when you see the result of maybe something that you did, which is to take the lives of someone who may be unarmed and disabled, to hear the impact of what it has on the family members and their lives could be destroyed forever.
Thank you, Mr. Thrower. That was one.
That's what I got out of it. That's exactly what I got out of it. That was just so powerful. There's so many lives destroyed after a single incident. And it wasn't just him and the young lady, it was his family. And like I said, anybody that's surrounded by him, their lives are destroyed. And just the fact that, the number of bullets that were used and the whole process, it's just amazing, amazing.
Yes, that was one of my greatest takeaways as well. I would be introducing our next panelist, Leroy Moore. He's a writer and poet, activist, and the founder of Krip-Hop Nation. So, Leroy, I know I saw you earlier.
Hey, how you doing, everybody?
Hey, there you go.
Hey, so glad to see you. So happy that this is doing, and thank you for having us on. Like Emmitt said, it's been 6 years since the movie has been done. And the thing that I like to say is that I love how Emmitt flips back and forth through the police talking about training over and over again, because that's the cycle, that's the state cycle that they have us in since 1989. It's all about training it over and over and over again. And with Poor Magazine and Misha, we broke out of that cycle and realized that we have to be the answer, because the police is going to do whatever they're going to do. but we, the community, have to provide the answer, and the answer is like Poor Magazine has this workshop of never calling the police. So really changing the focus on from what the police need to what the community needs. Yeah, and that's the thing, is that my granddad and my father and me, 3 generations, have been fighting police brutality. So if 3 generations have been fighting this, is to tell you that it's institutionalized. You know, is to tell you that we should, you know, change our focus, because we need to change our focus, and we need to change our lifestyle of, you know, not calling the police and having, you know, more connections with our neighbors, so we can, you know, have a neighbor help out. And that's what Poor Magazine's been doing, you know, since the 90s, you know, of never calling the police. And that's the thing that we need to realize as a community, because police don't follow laws. Police don't have to follow laws because they are protected from local all the way up to the federal. You know, I keep on saying it's 3 generations, my granddad, my father, and me. So that's to tell you that the police are protected from the local to the federal. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Moore. That's one common factor we we trace back to every week as we host this show, is the institutionalized part of it all. This has been going on for decades, for generations, and is more prevalent to now in society as it was then. And we're seeing the same cases over and over, as I just talked about in recent news. And as we watch this film, which was produced 6 years ago, we're still dealing with these same issues in our society. So the time is now to change how we process these calls, how we handle these different situations as they come up as well. So we're definitely fighting for that. So our next panelist and our final panelist coming up today is the co-editor of Poor Magazine, which was mentioned in the film as well. So we'll be speaking with Lisa Gray-Garcia, who goes by Tiny. So Tiny, are you there? All right, we'll bring Tiny in.
Hey, family.
There we are.
I'm that poverty scholar, that houseless mama, that houseless daughter. All those people you don't want to see, never want to be, look away from me. What you going to do, arrest me? We're in your city. Thank you for doing this panel, honestly. And of course, again, so much love to Emmitt for putting this all together, and for y'all for hosting, and big love to the revolutionary work of y'all at Rochester, getting you know, another police drop kicked out, because let's be real, a lot of people talk about defunding. We talk about disarming and abolishing, and that's all there is. That's it. That's all. I wonder if I could do a quick share of a screen. I think I can. It's letting me do it. I just want it. I don't know if it will, but let's see. Just because as we have this conversation, you know, art is also important, right? And so we're looking at the cover of the handbook, How to Not Call the Police Ever, which, you know, like my brother Leroy said, Poor Magazine been living, breathing, walking this. We never teach anything that we don't do, that we don't live, that we don't walk. But the reality is, you know, everything that your co-host said and everything that's said in the movie, and our beautiful auntie, sister Misha, those are all real. But the reality is, people's concept of safety is still tied, and not just safety, but assistance. I want to talk about that in relationship to disability just for a second, because us revolutionaries ain't going to call those numbers, okay? But disabled families and folk of all colors still make those calls, because somehow our minds have been linked with help in relationship to those numbers. And what we find over and over again is not only do they hurt us, they kill us, or as I say, test, arrest, and incarcerate us. But not calling them is not easy. It is not as easy as just being friendly with your neighbor. And I just want to lift that up for a second, because when we do these trainings, when we poor people and houseless and incarcerated people do these trainings, what we're teaching on is how you hold each other interdependently so that you never think that those 911 numbers ever mean help, but they always mean harm, hurt, or murder. And the crucial part is, how do we actually rebuild the villages, the communities, the barrios that have been destroyed by capitalism? That's the work. And it is the work that we're trying to do as landless and poor people here by unselling Mama Earth. You know, whenever we talk about not calling the pigs, we have to talk about how we make sure that poor people have access to land, how we make sure that the lie of rent is challenged. And these are things that I'm speaking on because we live in them. And so I just want to lift those up too. I love y'all, family. This is powerful work. But we really can't have those conversations, right, without each other. And I'll end with the line that that I say, and my brother Jeremy says: capitalism killed everything, even our courage. Omadale.
I love it, Tiny. We need that energy. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh man, we also have another panelist, and I can't wait to speak more to Tiny on more of these topic issues. Our last panelist, Dr. Ribert, she I'm sorry, I lost my place on my screen. Here we are. She's a lecturer in gender studies and disability studies at UCLA and has taught previously at UCLA Law and Columbia University Law, among other institutions. So Dr. Ribert, please give us more of a general title for yourself and tell us more about how you felt about the film we watched today as well.
Well, first I just want to honor the work that Emmitt and Leroy and Tiny clearly did in this film. I think The Art of Murder is one of the most powerful films I've ever seen, engaging the ways in which people with disabilities are abused systemically. And I'm really, really grateful and honored to be alongside these great panelists. I am the director of Repair, which is a nonprofit that's under the umbrella of the Mexican American Legal Defense and Educational Fund. And our work, we're a health and disability justice organization, and our work focuses on the ways in which people become disabled as a consequence of violence and exploitation and inequity. And given the realities of the United States, of course, that has to mean that a great deal of our emphasis are on the ways in which racism injures people, makes people sick, creates impairments that weren't already there. So the ways in which racism and poverty and gender violence and displacement and food insecurity and housing insecurity and the vulnerability of children and youth are disabling mentally and physically. So one thing I really, really love about this film is that it just very powerfully represents the ways in which police violence is not just deadly, but also disabling, the tremendous injuries that it leaves in people's psyches and bodies. And, you know, the film engaged that at this very personal and familial level that we've at least seen ripple effects of in the communities that we're in or around. But it also, you know, it also, I think, at least acknowledges the ways in which collectively policing creates mental health crises, the ways in which for Black and Brown and Indigenous people, particularly for folks who are afraid of deportation, the sort of fear of policing is a level of stress that actually in and of itself can, you know, rise to the level of creating traumatic stress symptoms. So grief and trauma and fear and the awareness that you are always vulnerable, these things in and of themselves are really dangerous, not just for those who are the direct victims. Those are some of my thoughts. Again, I want to just acknowledge what I'm sure a lot of audience members are thinking, which is that it takes tremendous clarity and a fair amount of strength and a willingness to be fairly defiant in the face of people who don't value the things that you know, and certainly aren't going to do things like fund or support them, to produce a film like this, to create it and hold to its clarity and its perceptions. So just want to honor everybody involved in its production.
Thank you, Dr. Ribet. I love what you mentioned about your nonprofit, sort of the umbrella of which everything falls under, because I saw the sort of definition during the film of who can experience PTSD. And you would think it's just war veterans until you understand that it's people that suffer through these different traumas in life that can also be under that same umbrella. And your cup is sort of full in your organization. Wow, I can't believe you, even with deportation, that's another trauma to live with, living in that fear of that constant fear as well of just your kids going out the house, just the kids leaving the house at sometimes, or just driving to the post office or anything that can happen in those different situations. We had a panel a few short weeks ago on illegal immigrants and things, and we had those discussions, and wow, it was very powerful, because you would think the issues of race and racism and things like that is the top of the notch, but there's just so much going on in this country that just hasn't changed in centuries. So having these open discussions and having you be a part of it this week as well is definitely going to be a broaden to a lot of us. So we thank you all. Thank you all our panelists for being here for that. We're going to lead into our Q&A section of the day, but we'll keep the discussion going as well throughout Q&A. Another big portion of the film was just the testimonies of the people who lived through these experiences. And again, which we mentioned earlier, of just seeing sort of the aftermath of what goes on in these situations is hard to listen to. I know it's hard to bear witness to those situations, but it was hard to listen to those stories and not feel like you're right there with them, with the traumas that they're living with after these traumatic incidents. So that was a very popular piece that stuck with me throughout the film as well. And again, thank you, Mr. Moore, for bringing that powerful film to us, and I'm glad we were able to broadcast it on our platform as well. So we are going into Q&A. So a question did pop up from, and any of our panelists can speak on these issues as well if you would like. So we have a question coming in from Sastry. Welcome back, Sastry. Are policymakers waiting it out to see the protests will go away like the virus, or using it to rally the base? So I'm glad that she is hopeful. I know we should remain optimistic. So the question is, do you feel that the police are waiting it out to see if the protesters and sort of the noise will calm down, or are they preparing for war? Are they sitting back and strapping up their boots and not really not being affected by these protesters and these testimonies that are coming out every day?
I think Leroy here, I think it said policy makers. So one thing we learned about, or I learned about police and policy, is that they don't follow policy. So we can do policy up until doomsday. We can do policy until we turn gray and blue. The police is going to find some loophole, something to not follow the policy. So, like I said in the beginning, we have to flip the script and really, take care of the community. So for example, all of a sudden, there's a movement to defund the police, which is good. Poor Magazine's been saying that since God knows when, but it's good. I mean, the Black Panthers have been saying it since God knows when. But it's good that it's still here and it's still around. But the thing is that we know in this country that America doesn't deal great with transition. You know, we can go back to Reagan, you know, under when he closed all the institutions. This America didn't have a transition plan for people in the institutions to have housing in the community. So now we're in the same transition plan where people's like, yeah, about the police, okay, good, but we need a plan to get there. And we can't let this opportunity go, because that's what the system wants us to do. The system wants us to say, okay, we did that, and we're gonna redirect funds to security guards, you know, or some other policing arm. So we need that transition plan. You know, what does that transition plan look like? You know, where is this funding gonna go to? You know, there's so many models, you know, from Poor Magazine to the model in outside of Denver, where Paul Childs, a young teenager, was killed with autism. And after that killing, the neighborhood got together and the neighborhood said, no, we don't want police training, but we want to train our community around autism. And that lasted 2 years, and under those 2 years, everybody in that community had training. So these are the models that should be uplifted to the state, federal, but of course these models are not uplifted because it doesn't equal more money for the system, more money for Democrats, more money for police. But it's up to us to lift these models up, from Poor Magazine to Denver to, you know, Cop Watch to, you know, just models, you know, that's doing locally. So we need to really lift these models up, and we need to really talk about transition parents and what that looks like.
Thank you, Mr. Moore. There we go.
Yeah, I just want to say that police, really, and I say this to a lot of people being a former New York City police officer, the police are not in control. It's the legislators, which I tell people, they change laws, and then from those laws, these systems make policies that has impacted us. When I was a police officer, the things that the police do now, we could not do because you were going to jail and get convicted because the laws were different. They changed the laws in a way, your legislators, people you put in office, changed them so that the police departments could find ways to protect the police officers, no matter what they did, to have it that when you do sue someone, a police officer, then the city, the very people who are victims are the ones who pay. You know, and it's really come a time that I learned from Lisa from Poor Magazine about, and it was radical when I heard it the first time, about not calling the police, but then I got it, you know, in that we really need new approaches to how we deal with this coming from the community of people who are really impacted. You need to sit down with them and see what they have to say instead of not really giving them a voice at the table where the decisions are made. Because they, for one, the police are taking on responsibilities they should not have. They should not be in the business of dealing with people who have mental or other disabilities. A 40-hour class does not prepare them to deal with it. When I was a police officer, when we were called for a situation like that, our responsibility was to do nothing but wait there till a supervisor came on the scene and the health people came to do what they need to do. The only thing we were required to do at that time was if the health people from the emergency or ambulance service required us to handcuff the prisoner, then we would handcuff them, not the person, I'm sorry, handcuff the patient, and then we would escort them to the hospital. What they do now is totally not within the realm of what a police officer should be able to do. And consequently, for decades, we've been getting these horrific stories about they don't know how to act, they're afraid, and they kill and shoot or maim and beat first. But to answer the question about whether or not what's going to happen, they have politicized this whole issue so much because this protest seems to be different than others because there's a multitude of different people, backgrounds, and coaches who are engaged in this. And that changes everything that I think they don't know how necessary to react because it has a political impact depending on how they act. So they just don't act because the people at the top who are controlling them are saying, don't do nothing, play it safe because this is political now.
That's the Band-Aid they throw on many causes around this world these days.
I just wanted,
go ahead, Tiny.
Yeah, real quickly, I wanted to add to Emmitt that, you know, I have a different name for them. I call them politricksters, but you know me and the words. But the reality is that's absolutely on point. So you had all these mayors standing up going, oh, we're going to defund, whoop to whoop, right here in Frisco. And then somehow that gets dribbled away. And then, you know, we look away, right? And remember that the moment that we're living in, this moment in history is so hard for all of us. I mean, out here we have orange skies today. It's absolutely apocalypse. No joke. I'm not even playing. It's very bizarre and terrifying. The entire Bay Area is yellow all day long. But point being is we in this moment where Mama Earth is screaming, where us mamas are screaming, right? Where we have a little less on our hamster wheel plate to be watching. And I would second what Emmitt said, because the only way these politricksters do anything is with pressure. Not pressure in this, you know, BS idea of defund. No. You know, what did they do in Frisco? I think they whittled it down to like less than $1 million. It just like took away maybe a month of their retirement fund. I'm not even playing. It's an insult. And so then we have the same thing. So personally, we don't call for defunding because defunding, you can play, you know, sideways games with defunding because you can like, you know, play Monopoly, right? We're talking about an abolition. And the realness is you kind of have to push for that big one, especially in this moment. And I was really, really inspired, you know, also by what Professor Beth said, because, you know, part of the whole aspect of it is that us traumatized people hurt each other all the time. We have all kinds of reasons to choose to call that number. And that's a real thing, you know, because our bodies are in pain. Our lives are in pain. We're exploited for labor, for capital, for poverty. These are all jobs, right? So I also feel, again, that I want to just lift up the relationship to poverty and homelessness as we have this conversation about disability. They are not unlinked. They are not unlinked when we talk about access to safe places to live, sleep, and be. So anyway, thank you.
Thank you.
Can I chime in with a couple thoughts?
Yes, definitely.
Leroy first, go for it.
I just want to say, you know, it's international too. You know, we see in South Africa, you know, a 13-year-old boy with Down syndrome. Before that, we saw in Palestine the boy with Down syndrome. You know, so it's international. And I'm not saying it's only boys and men, but most of the cases are boys and men that are Black and brown and that are disabled. So we need more programs to really focus on Black and brown disabled boys you know, in our organizations, in our schools. You know, I do what's called Krip-Hop, and we have like a Black disabled man talk, you know, every month on YouTube. You know, just get together and talking. You know, I do also, you know, books on Black disabled history, art, you know, hip hop. You know, this is kind of stuff we also need. You know, people think that, you know, quote unquote reform, I hate that word reform, but people think that, you know, only activism and only policy can change things. Art can change things, music can change things. You know, mentorship can change things, especially for Black and brown disabled boys. So yeah. Beth, take it away.
Thank you. No, I'm glad to, well, I'll try to follow that. That was great. I want to just say that I think one of the challenges is that mainstream disability rights movements are not doing the work enough to just acknowledge how much experiences of disability, oppression, and subordination in the United States are grounded in racism and entangled with racism. And there's an avoidance in some disability communities about sort of talking about issues around policing, around mass incarceration, especially folks not wanting to talk about how much people with mental illness are incarcerated in the United States. It's just at just unbelievable rates. You know, and wanting to distance from the experiences of Black and brown and Indigenous people with mental illness who are, you know, continually preyed upon in the criminal justice system and dying very prematurely because of encounters with the criminal justice system. So we need to deal with that. You know, we need to deal with white folks with disabilities who are resistant to, you know, who are sort of like, oh, I don't want to be associated with the idea that people with disabilities are violent or criminals. I'm like, that's not the issue here to begin with. But anywhere that people with disabilities are being hurt or victimized or preyed upon, we need to show up for each other. So I think a really vital part of the work that has to be taken up in order for like a film, the challenge that a film like this offers to us to be answered and realized is that we just have to grapple with racism in disability communities. And there's a different dynamic that intersects with it around a kind of silence about disability in a lot of communities of color that's deep, that's about the ways in which racism and disability stigma interact and make for really toxic stew. A lot of times if you're sort of acknowledging disability in communities of color, it's like you're admitting all these different racist stereotypes and tropes are right? Because the negative messages that we get about disability are not ones that are racially neutral, right? Where it's like incompetent and lazy and crazy, right? All of these have a racial charge as well as a disability charge. And there's just tremendous grief and trauma, which the film did an incredible job of capturing a little bit of. And to engage disability in a race-conscious way, you need to step up to that. And that's hard, hard work. But between those two things, between sort of white disability studies and disability rights movements not talking about race, not talking about criminal justice nearly enough, and then, you know, sort of people of color with disabilities having to constantly lift the issue because it's hard for everyone to talk about. That means that a lot less work is happening than it could. So I could keep going on that, but I'm going to stop now.
Thank you for that. We do have enough time for one more question before we go into closing remarks, guys. One of our viewers, Ms. Moncrice, this film really it really has her fired up, as I'm gonna put it in her words, but she did ask about the young lady, the artist in the film. Has any update been, has come upon her case with the injustice that she suffered through in the shooting death of her friend? And she also posed a question, do you think that, is it the presence, is it the lack of God being present on a major social level to blame, or is it the change in the social norms over time that's to blame? on these conditions that we're living through nowadays.
Well, about an update on Latia, the issue was, and that you would know about this, about survivors and being victims of violence and the trauma. She never recovered from that. She sought help everywhere and got help nowhere, except, of course, the help she got from activists like Poor Magazine, Lisa, and the Irizarry Foundation. Other than that, she got no help, and her condition worsened. From when I went out and interviewed her in her studio in her house, by the time the film came out, she was a totally different person because she never got any type of help. Nobody helped her, not only for her condition, but also for her case. Nobody politically or otherwise. So her life went down from that point. She's seen in the film, she couldn't paint straight lines anymore. She had to resort, well, I don't know how she did it, but she sewed paint chips onto canvas and created her art. So she got worse. So that's what happens. It's like there are no resources that readily takes you to deal with the kind of trauma that people with disabilities who are victimized by police have access to, that will take them and help them get over and beyond that to heal themselves. The other part of the question about whether or not God, what was the question about God's impact on what's going on today? Well, I think we as people and communities and countries and world are the cause of our problems because there's just not the kind of love that needs to be in the world for you to care about people the way you need to do. And if you do care about people and love them, you won't do the things you do. You will change your behavior. One thing that we found out, and I was very surprised about this during researching this and talking to people about, every day I would go by and really realize that this was not just a national problem, this is an international problem, and it was back then also. But when I went to organizations, and me and Leroy went to organizations to try and join forces, people were not very inclusive. The fact is that 50% of the people killed by police, right, have a disability. But the problem is no one really knows that in general because they don't publicize it. They don't publicize that fact. There's no statistics that will give you on a daily how many of those people who were brutalized were disabled. They use all these other things, but they don't keep those records. And so therefore, the severity of the issue really is kind of hidden. It's kind of hidden in front of your very eyes. And I discovered it only by doing the research for this film.
Thank you. That's a huge lift to why we need community more than ever right now. I really thank you for those words. Yeah, the way we love nowadays is a big implication as to why we are and what we're going through right now. Not even knowing your neighbors and things like that, which most people don't. They stick to their own household. They stick to themselves. When we used to say it takes a village, that stigma has since left, and we've all been stuck to ourselves, using having to lean on others to come to our aid in the need of protests and things like that. But when you uplift your community, when you stand by your community and you really be there for each other, we can solve these problems. We don't have to call the police. Shout out to Lisa for these. We have our community. We have help. We have the aid we would need. So I thank you for those words. Anyone else want to speak on that?
I think, and I want to thank you for bringing this to, all of us together. And we talk about the problem constantly, but we don't talk about. We do, but our answers is not uplifted on the national level. So I like to go back to, of course, Poor Magazine, Never Calling the Cops, in Denver, with their program, and also I like to put a challenge out to the Malcolm X Grassroots Center, because as we know, when now is the time for the census. We know that numbers count in this country. Numbers is like the number one thing. If you can't prove it with numbers, it's not, it's not facts. We all know that's a lie, but we have to play in this capitalist, society. So I'm saying, that there's no study around police brutality and people with disabilities. We talk about the Ruderman Foundation, because they put out a study and everybody jumps on their bandwagon about 50%. But that study came from, that, just be honest, that study came from the two white males. So if we want a real study that deals with Black and brown people, then we need to go to our agencies. I think Malcolm X Grassroots Center could be an excellent agency to partner with the disability community to do a report, just like they did a report on police brutality in the Black community that came out years ago. And that report was groundbreaking. We need to do the same for our Black and brown community with our organizations, not them doing it, but them teaming up with us and doing it together. I think that would just blow everything out of the water, because you'll have numbers and you have new relationships in the Black community and in the Black disabled community. So.
I really want to thank you all for joining us this week. This was a much needed conversation.